So good morning, welcome along. We're going to talk about staying well in research. And so Gemma's giving me a little bit of background for me. If I was there in person, that's what I would look like. But of course, we can't do things in person these days. And so you'll have to do with a picture. Very hard for me to be there in person anyway, because I'm here in Australia, as Gemma pointed out. That's a map of Australia, but showing all the Aboriginal language groupings across the country. There are hundreds of different Aboriginal groups, each with their own language. And I'm down here in Adelaide, at the bottom of South Australia. And we were in the traditional lands of the Kaurna Aboriginal people. They're the traditional owners of the land here. And as Gemma pointed out, it's 6:30 p.m. on Tuesday evening here. And so this is the evening shift for me. And it's a bit ironic talking to all of you because you're in the hot place at the moment and we're in the middle of winter down here and you're enjoying a bit of a heat wave. So it's a bit of a different situation. And I have a few jobs here in Adelaide. One is at Flinders doing some lecturing and researching on the topic of self-management. How people manage themselves. And I'm especially interested in why people don't manage themselves. All the things that get in the way, like overcommitment, distraction, perfectionism, procrastination, all those things that researchers tend to be really, really good at. So you tend to be the subjects in my research. I follow you around, find out how you work, write papers about it, come back and talk about it, how to overcome some of those things. And we'll do some of that in this workshop today. As Gemma said, most of my time is not at the university at all now. It's running a small little business called Thinkwell and running workshops like this at universities around Australia or around the world now about how to be more effective. And if you want to find out more, we have this website, thinkwell.com.au. And our research and material is available there. There's lots of stuff there that you can use for yourself or for your students in terms of organizing the research. So lots of free resources on that website. We also have some books on these topics. The one that's relevant to today is 52 Ways to Stay Well During a PhD. And I wrote that, or postdoc or research career, and I wrote that book in January 2020. And if you can remember back then, that was even before we'd heard the word COVID or pandemic. That was how to stay well generally in research or while you're doing the thing. But of course, even more relevant in these difficult days as we're going through them. Okay, now I'm here in Australia, but if you're listening carefully, you'll think it's not a very convincing Australian accent. And that's right, because I'm from a place called Sligo. Some of you might recognize it, but it's over there on the west coast of Ireland. And my degree, a long time ago now, was at University College Dublin in agricultural science. So I started off there and then moved from science into education for a while. And then for the last 20 or so years into psychology. So I've moved around a few disciplines in my time. So that's me. So now it'd be good to find out about you. There's 49 of us here. So if we were all in a room together, we'd shake hands and say hello, but of course we can't do that either. So we'll be doing that virtually. So I'll just get you to type into the chat function your name and where you are right now. And that could be town or city or country even, but also are you on campus or at home? Have you managed to crawl out of the bed yet? Or have you got a cat sitting on your lap? Or where are you right now? So let's find out your name and where you are. If you'll find the chat function. Emily is in your office in Port Mahog in North Wales, and Jenny is in Anglesey, sunny Anglesey. Kim in Bangor. Gemma is in Bethesda. Vicky is in Colwyn Bay. Cammy, no, some of these names I'm just not going to pronounce. I'm admitting defeat. Sophie is in Northwest Wales. Naoma is in Cheshire. Anita is working from home in Warrington. Caris is in Benlick. Lowry is working from home. Sophie is in North Wales at home. Louise is at home in Scotland. Mike is in Warrington in your home office. David home with kids in the Bangor. Isabel in the Isle of Man working from home. Alison is there. Ellen is also in Anglesey. Doris is in Bangor. Leah in Bangor. Sarah Bangor. Alice is in Menai Bridge. Rolf is outside Bangor with the cats on the bed. Lucy's in the garden in Bangor. Evans is in London. Seamus is in South Armagh. Lauren is in Bangor, North Wales on the sofa. Natalie's in Bangor as well. George is in Sandbach. Gemma currently watching in the garden in Menai Bridge. Paula is in Northwest Wales. Virginia is in Rabchub. Frank is in the Loire in France. Sounds nice. Carol's in Bulbane, Anglesey. Demisi, Manchester. Jane is in the attic office, which is baking hot, probably today, I would imagine. Matt is in Anglesey. Isabel working from home in Germany. Emma is in North Wales with the dogs and kids. Wendy's in Yorkshire. Jess is with a sleeping puppy at your feet. Molly's in Bangor. And last is Jonas in the new arts building at Bangor University. Okay. Now, the reason I do that, it takes a bit of a while, but in these online days, it is really easy to get isolated. You just see a name somewhere, so you don't know who's there. So first of all, it's just to welcome you all along as people, not just a name, but also that you can see where all your colleagues are, because they're all over the place as well. And one of the nice things about this online world is we can all be in different places, different countries, and still get together for this sort of event. We're going to use the chat function a bit later on as well, and we're also going to use the breakout room, so you'll get to say hello to some of these people. And the good news is we're going to have a break as well. So we'll have a break about halfway through, so you can grab a tea or a coffee or whatever in the middle. So let's get started now. And we're talking about staying well in research. And my experience, and I've been working in research for a long time now, is that research is a bit different from many other jobs. Some of you are doing PhDs. And a PhD is different because in a PhD, there's a lot of flexibility, which is nice. But that becomes a challenge then. How do you actually manage yourself? There's isolation. Most people doing a PhD describe it as a very isolating experience. And so, there's nobody else doing exactly what you're doing. And so it's a really isolating thing. But also uncertainty, because you don't know what you're doing. And, in research, you're wondering will it work out, but you don't know. So it's quite different from many other jobs. If you go through the PhD into a postdoc is different yet again. Because in a postdoc, there's insecurity. It's always that short-term money, where's my next job going to come from? My funding has all soft money all the time. Publish or perish. You're trying to survive. You got to publish papers, that huge competitiveness and push. And, if you don't do that, you don't survive. But probably also for many postdocs, there's multiple demands because you're probably at a stage of life where you have relationships, you're trying to set up a house, a family and other things, a lot of stuff going on at the same time, as well as trying to establish your career. And if you get through that, even a research career is different. If you do choose to stay purely in research, it's different again because you're going to be existing on soft money, which means you're always wondering where's the next bit of money going to come from, and not just for you, but for people you work with as well or you employ. You probably now have more responsibilities. As you get more senior, you're now looking after other people, you get involved in other committees and whatever, so you have lots more demands on your time. And the other thing about research is it is a very critical culture. In research, people are very happy to point out your mistakes and your errors because that's rigorous thinking, looking for the gaps and things, which is good for rigor, but it's not particularly nice when people keep doing it to you all the time or when we even do it to ourselves. So research has interesting qualities about it, makes it a bit different from other things. And so that means all of those things can wear you down a little bit. The uncertainty, the soft money, the criticism, it can wear you down. And the reality is so much of it is out of your control. You can do the best you can and your research won't work, your paper doesn't get accepted, the experiments don't work. So there's a lot of things out of your control, no matter how hard you work. And that can lead to people being a bit frustrated and worn out by the whole thing. But the good news is there are things you can do to stay well. And again, that's what I'm going to do for the rest of the time with you really, is show you strategies you can take to stay well at work, but also out of work and actually enjoy the whole part and stay well during the whole lot of it. So we'll work our way through a few ideas. The first one is we have to talk about isolation. And many people, especially PhD students, whatever, find it a very isolating experience because in your previous education, you were part of a group. There are other people. But when you're doing your research, it's basically your research. Not many other people really that interested in it. And so not many other people to talk about it. Your family have probably stopped asking you questions about it by now because they're worn out by the whole thing. And so, there's not many people to talk to about the whole thing. So isolation is a very common thing. Now, that was before lockdown and being working from home and everything like that. And of course, now people are physically isolated as well. And while isolation might be good for controlling the virus, there's lots and lots of research to show that isolation is not good for your well-being. Most of us need to be connected. Some need a little connection, some need a lot of connection, but almost every person wants to be connected in some way or other. And research is a bit hard like that. So that's the difficulties. But the good news about isolation is you can do something about it. And that is, don't get isolated. And I'll give you a few hints or tips. And the first one is, I'm giving you permission to drink lots of tea and coffee. Those morning tea breaks or coffee breaks, they're really good. Because first of all, you might like coffee, but more importantly, it's a chance to go and chat with your colleagues, talk about how they're going, to complain about the world, just get things off your chest, but it normalizes you. And people think, oh, I'm too busy to go and have coffee. No, it's important you do it because it builds that sense of connection. Again, now that was when you'd come onto campus. But if you can't do that, you have to organize virtual coffee catch-ups, just catch-ups with people to have a bit of a chat about things. How are things going? So I'm giving you permission to drink coffee and chat and whatever. This is good for you. It'll make you stay well. It'll make you more productive as well. The other thing in terms of reducing isolation is you need a support crew. All of us need a support crew. That could be your partner, family and friends around you, colleagues in your research area or colleagues in your school, maybe a writing group or other groups you're involved in, social groups, counselors, psychologists, organizations within the institution. All of those are really important so that when things aren't going well, you have somebody to talk to or just have a complaint about and so forth. Now, the important thing with a support crew is you just can't dial up a support crew when you need it. You got to build a support crew. And that means you have to go out and connect with people, invest in them, spend time with them, whatever, so that when you do need them, they're there. So I would encourage you to sort of build a network of people around you. And again, lots and lots of research shows that people who are connected and networked feel better as well. So I would encourage you to do that. Even though, again, you think I'm too busy, it's good for you. And the third strategy is, remember in the olden days, we all used to get together in a room like that for things called lectures and workshops. Well, they were really good for two reasons. The first one is you might learn something from the person talking, but just as important, you connected with the other people in the room. You chatted with them and saw how they were going, you saw them nodding, or just felt more part of a group or part of a thing. So they're really good. But again, of course, it might be a while before we all get in a room together. So again, we have to do that virtually. And that's what we're doing now. And so even though we can't physically be there, we're still connected in some way because we're all on this sort of event together. So I would encourage you to participate in online workshops, physical ones, if your department has a seminar series, all those. And you might be going, I'm too busy. I need to get on with my work or my papers or whatever. But the problem is, if you don't get involved in these things, then you start to feel isolated, you lose motivation, you don't feel so good. So I would encourage you to participate in these things, especially in these lockdown days or sort of isolation days. It's even more important to connect with those things. First of all, you might learn, but just as importantly, it reduces the sense of isolation. So that's the first few things is trying to get rid of isolation. So I said isolation is not good, but you can do something about it. Don't get isolated. The next thing about research is research by and large is a lot of flexibility. You get a lot of choice, which thing will I work on, how will I work, when will I work, I can work late, I can work weekends, I can work other times, I can do that. So that's nice, as opposed to teaching, which, you got to do at certain times, the deadlines are there, marks have to get in. In research, things are much more flexible. And there's no doubt flexibility is nice. It is nice to be able to say, well, I don't have any meetings today, so I won't bother getting out of bed, or I will just wander around my pajamas all day, or, you just organize yourself. However, after a while, structure is good. And most of us need structure in our lives. When things become too flexible, then you sort of lose that sense of anchors in your day or when you're going to do different things. So we need structure. And the kind of things like structure might be, and again, this was pretty important last year during when you're locked down or working from home a lot, it's just a getting up time. Because you'll think, oh, I don't have any meetings today, I'll just lie in bed. But then when you do wake up, you feel, oh, I've been lazy, I should have worked harder, and you feel guilty. Just showering, getting dressed, again, most of us only get dressed from the waist up these days. You don't have to worry about the bottom part because you don't see anybody else below. But again, showering, getting dressed, because it makes you feel better. You just feel like I'm organized and so forth. Regular meals. Again, when you were on campus, you'd see people going for lunch. You think it must be lunchtime. Now, the whole day blurs together. And so you can be either eating all day long or not eat at all. Regular breaks. Again, when you're around people, they'll stop at certain times, and so they have times. A finishing time. Again, if you're on campus, people go home, you see them leaving, it must be time to go now. Now, going home means working from the family room to the kitchen. You're just walking around the same, you're almost at work all the time. And that's a bit of a problem. I said the flexibility is nice, but it means there's no balance. Now, these things don't sound very exciting, but from a psychology point of view, they are very important. And they even have a name. These are called ADLs, or activities of daily living. And when you work with people whose life isn't going so well, maybe they've got anxiety or depression or whatever, you're working out, they don't do some of these things. They spend all day in bed and then wake up all night, or don't groom themselves, don't eat properly, don't nourish themselves. So these are the early warning signs of things not going so well. But once again, you can do something about these. You can do it. And that's why routines are very important, especially in research where there's flexibility. I'll just read one little section from the book. It said, routines are especially important when things aren't going so well. Let's say you're not making much progress in your research, losing motivation, and you feel a bit down. So you decide to have a lie-in in the morning and binge watch TV. But then you start to feel guilty because you haven't done any work. And then you start to worry about the research. And then you start to worry about everything else as well. And then you lose more motivation and you feel worse. So that's when routines could help. The occasional lie-in is a treat, the occasional binge watching is fine, but when that's what you're doing all the time and you're finding it hard to do anything else, that's when you need routines. And that's the importance of a routine. You don't do something when you feel like it, you do it because it's a routine, and then you feel better. You say, I don't feel like getting up, but when you do get up, you feel better. I don't feel like going for a walk, but when you do, you feel better. And so that's the idea of routine. It's time to do something, whether you feel like it or not, then you feel better. So again, in research where there's not much structure, you need to build your own routines for yourself. And again, the lockdown, the working from home, all those things sort of upset people's routines. So you have to sort of build your own ones in to accommodate for that. Now that's when people say to me, but I don't feel like doing these things. And that's when we have to have a little chat about procrastination. And as I'm going through this, I would like you to think about something you're putting off. It shouldn't be too hard for most of you, I'd imagine. Probably doing a little bit of writing, or maybe analyzing that data, or for some meeting you got to go to, whatever. Now, there are two problems with procrastination. The first one is you don't do the job. And that's bad enough. But that's not the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the big black cloud of guilt you carry around with you all the time. You feel bad. Oh, I'm lazy. What's wrong with me? Why didn't I do it? I should have worked harder. You can't even enjoy putting things off. You just feel bad all the time. So we have to have a little chat about this guilt, because this is not good for you. And the interesting thing about procrastination is we don't tend to procrastinate about nice things. You don't procrastinate about watching your favorite TV program or having your favorite meal. It'll be something difficult, like a bit of writing, or that revise and resubmit in a journal, or something horrible like that. And that's when I have to introduce you to a character called the motivation fairy. Now, when my boys were younger, they believed in the tooth fairy. And that's the idea. You lose your tooth, put it under the pillow, tooth fairy magically finds out where you live and comes along and puts a pound under your pillow. And most of us seem to believe in the motivation fairy. And that's the idea. I don't feel like doing that today. I'm going to go home tonight and hope the motivation fairy flies by my house and sprinkles motivation dust. And when I wake up tomorrow morning, I really want to work on that difficult project or make that call or whatever it is. Well, sadly, my boys, the tooth fairy doesn't exist. And the bad news for all of us here is the motivation fairy doesn't exist either. I know it's a bit sad, but if you don't feel like doing it today, you're not going to feel like doing it tomorrow either, or the next day. In fact, the only time you're likely to feel like doing that difficult job is when the deadline is at 5 o'clock today. And that isn't motivation, that's fear. You're doing it because something bad's going to happen. I'm going to get into trouble. So we have to have a little chat about motivation. Because here's what people think. People think motivation leads to action, which in English means when I feel like doing something, I'll do it. You might notice a little flaw in that model. Going out for dinner, I feel like doing that, I'll do it. Watching my favorite TV program, I feel like doing that. Writing the yucky section of the paper, I don't feel like doing that. So then you sit there with your arms folded, waiting for the motivation fairy. So sadly, that's not the way it works at all. Here's what psychology tells us is action has to come first, then you get motivated, then you take more action. Which unfortunately means you have to start doing things before you feel like it, then you get motivated, then you take action. And I'm sure you've had that experience yourself. You've probably put something off as long as you possibly can. You know, you're supposed to work on that paper, but your house is as tidy as it could be. You have matched up all the odd socks in the odd sock drawer. You have done every possible thing to avoid. And you go, well, I suppose I better start. And you open up the thing and you go, oh, this isn't as bad as I thought. Why didn't I start this last week? Didn't start last week because you're waiting to get motivated. So unfortunately, you have to jump in before you feel ready. And that's a bit hard. So there's a few ways to make it easier for you. The first one is you have to set a specific time. No point at all saying, oh, I'll do that later this week. That's like when you meet somebody and as you're walking away, you say, oh, we must catch up sometime. Everybody knows that's not going to happen. When you really want to catch up, you'd say, let's meet for lunch at 1 o'clock or let's have a call. You put a time on it. So there's no point of saying later in the week. It has to be 2 o'clock tomorrow or 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, something like that. No number, not going to happen. The second thing is you must break it down into small bits. Because if you say at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I'm going to finish all that paper or whatever, your brain goes, that's not going to happen. That's too big. So you break it down. I'm going to put in one line into that paper. And the good news is, if at 2 o'clock you do that, you can have a reward. You get to do something nice, maybe have a cup of coffee or have a little walk around the block or something like that. However, from a psychology point of view, there is a crucial thing about rewards, and that is they have to happen after you do the job, not before. Because that's the mistake we make. We say, well, if I start working on that piece of writing, I'm going to have a coffee. Well, why don't I have the coffee first and then do the work? Of course, it doesn't work that way, so the rewards come after. What you'll find is once you make a start, you go, well, now that I'm here, I can do a bit more and a bit more. And often people say to me, once I'm into it, it's not so bad. Well, there's the clue. You get into it, and that's where the motivation happens. So let's see if you've got the idea. I'm going to get you to type into the chat, what have you been putting off? And how could you apply this model? How could you break it down or do something? So let's see, what have you been avoiding and how could you apply this? Must be something they're putting off. During the term, marking that big assignment, yes, and that big assignment, immediately say a big assignment, you go, hang on, that's not going to be fun, I'm never going to do that. And so you're not going to wake up in the morning and think, oh, today is the day to do that. So Frank, so what you got to do is, okay, 2 o'clock, I have to open up the first part of that and do one little tiny bit. Yeah, finishing the chapter, once you say the word finishing, your brain goes, oh, that's going to take forever, I'm not going to do that. So what you have to go is, I'm going to have to put in one line into that assignment. Book chapter avoidance, absolutely. And, waiting for it to get fun, never going to happen. Finishing a book proposal, that's never going to be fun, is it? So it's starting writing a book chapter, yeah. And then a second revise and resubmit. Yes, and once you've done one, oh, do I have to do it again? And the last one was horrible. This one was going to be just as horrible. And so you sort of make it awful. So what you have to go is, okay, at 2 o'clock, I have to go and read the comments or just do one thing and so forth. Really focus on my primary sources, a paper revision, yeah, writing up the scoping review, writing a fellowship application, yeah, that's never going to be fun. So you could aim to just write the introduction of the scientific summary, yeah, you break it down to one whole part, put in one line or something like that. Well, high achievers make this hard because they want to make it big, they want to finish the whole thing. Yeah, book chapter revisions just need to get started, I need to open it up and start with the small corrections. That's the model, pick one and make a start, yeah. I'll scroll down. Set up a plan that works for me. The weather is too good. Yeah, absolutely. Yes. And so don't worry, wait a while and it'll disappear. That'll take care of itself. Mike says, defining the working model and deciding what to include and what to cut. And again, so the trick here is make it small, but it has to have a time. So sadly, the motivation fairy doesn't exist. The good news is you don't need the motivation fairy. You just need to make a start. And the benefit of that is, first of all, you'll get more work done, but just as importantly, or even more importantly, you get rid of the guilt. You don't have to beat yourself up all the time. And so you overcome that sort of guilt. So that's really important about guilt. Now, that's procrastination. Procrastination's first cousin is perfectionism. And they're nicely linked together. And it's a fair bet most of you are perfectionists. How would I know that? Well, doing research is probably a good start. You know, the working on something for a small area for a long time is a bit of a clue, but I can work it out pretty easily. Anybody find that annoying? Is that an annoying picture you want to type into chat? Does that bother you? Or anybody thinks it's fine? Yes. Yep, it's awful. Yep, because of course that circle in the middle is in the wrong place. It should be over there a little bit. It's not right, and so unless it's called art, yeah, maybe the person wanted it to be like that. But for a perfectionist, no, it has to be in the middle. Uh, this road worker clearly wasn't a perfectionist. You know, you had one job, just put the thing back, couldn't put it back in the right way. Do you need to get out a crowbar and start moving that around to make it line up? I don't know in your house, but and he says, please stop. But in my house, we have a dishwasher like this. And there's one person in my house who insists that all the forks have to be in little rows and all the knives because it's more efficient that way. No, I don't care. So I just put them in any old way at all. And sometimes to annoy that person, I'll just turn one around to see what happens, because it's a dishwasher. It doesn't matter that much. But for a perfectionist, there is a right way to do this. You know, things are supposed to be the way they're supposed to be. And the thing about perfectionism is it's sort of good in some senses because it helps you achieve things at a high level. But after a while, it becomes a bit of a limiting factor. And if Fiona said, just need to get the job done, however, but not for a perfectionist. The perfectionist wants to do the job right. They'll be saying, if you're going to do it right. No point in doing a half-baked job. Whereas the slightly less perfect would say, look, just get the job done in some way. So on the one, and many researchers are perfectionists. And as I said, perfectionism from a psychology point of view is quite a difficult trait to change, because people like their perfectionism because it makes you successful. And people flatter you and say, oh, you did so well, look at how good you did, and so forth. And so it's actually quite difficult to change. But after a while, it becomes a bit of a handicap. And I like this quotation from John Cleese from Fawlty Towers, that the problem was that I carried around with me a tendency to feel that other people's respect for me would vanish if what I did was second rate. And while I accept that this perfectionism is likely to stimulate the production of better work, it doesn't, unfortunately, go hand in hand with a relaxed and happy attitude towards life. And that's the problem, is perfectionists don't tend to be very happy because they're always focusing on the thing that didn't get done. When a perfectionist gets 98% on an exam, what are they thinking about? Where was the other 2%? What did I get wrong? And so they're focusing on the gaps and whatever. Draft and redraft again, never perfect, just much better. So yeah, so a perfectionist is always striving for this. And so the one thing is good, you strive, but it means you're never quite happy. No matter what you do, there's always another thing, another area. The other problem for all of you is when you were doing maths at secondary school, you might have been able to get 100%, but you are never going to get 100% on a piece of research, because there is no one right way to do it. There's 10 different ways. All of them have pluses and minuses, and whichever you do, someone's going to point out the gaps. And so you're striving for something that's never going to be achieved. And so that's always that push, no matter how I've done, I should have done better or more. And perfectionists' logic tends to be either perfect or awful. And so perfectionism is good, very good, excellent, but the perfectionist is way off the scale. It's way past that. And as I said, perfectionist is either success or failure. There's no good enough. Good enough counts as a failure. And so, you know, you give a good presentation, one thing wrong, the whole thing was a disaster. And so it's focusing on the gaps rather than the things that go well. Again, when perfectionists are doing a piece of writing or a piece of work, they're not thinking of getting their paper published. They want the Nobel Prize for this. This has to be the best thing ever in the whole world. And the problem is that that's just really difficult. And it means you're always going to be feeling you haven't done enough or worked hard enough. So I'm going to give you a couple of strategies for dealing with perfectionism, which you won't like very much. The first one is the Pareto Principle, or the 80-20 rule. And what this rule says is that 20% of your effort, let's say on a piece of writing, will give you about 80% of the output. Most of the ideas, most of the words. The problem is, to get the last 20% to make it perfect now requires 20, 20, 20, 20, 80% more effort. That's when you spend 2 days tracking down one reference or reading the thing for the 24th time, or all that fine-tuning and finessing. So the question becomes, does everything have to be perfect? And certainly with writing, I would strongly argue the word draft means it doesn't have to be perfect. Get it up to a reasonable standard and get feedback and so forth. Now, I'll bet many of you have a piece of writing that's at 80%. And I'd be saying, now is the time to press send. And that's when you go, oh, no, I don't think it's 80. I think it's 79%. Just a little bit more time, a little bit more polishing. So I'm going to check that out with you now. At what point would you be happy to hand over a draft of a piece of writing or a piece of work to somebody? Is it 80, 90, 100, 200? Never? So just type into chat, when are you happy to hand over something, a piece of work? When I think it's final, 100%, yes, which is, of course, never, hardly ever. Yeah. 60%, yeah, as soon as you write it, yeah. 75, 90% so inefficient, yeah. 70%, yeah. 80%, 90%, yeah. When I really have to, the last minute deadline, when they take it away from it, probably 90%, yeah. 80%. 80% put it hard to start the task in the first place. Yeah, 60%. Yeah. Look, the reality is anything less than 100%. Jason said, when I have a good feeling, which is probably not going to happen very often. And so anything less than 100%. Because if your model is, I'll wait until I'm happy with it, that means never. Because there's always more. Should I put this one before that one? Should I move that around? And you can muck around with it for ages and ages and ages. And so now some people say, how do you know when it's 80%? And certainly with the books I've written, when a piece of writing gets to about 80%, I lose all ability to work out whether it's getting any better or not. That's when I've been looking at it for an hour, no changes have happened, I'm wasting time here. So if you're spending an awful lot of time and it's not getting particularly much better, you now need to hand it over and get the feedback along that whole way. Now, if you're, here's another model to encourage you to hand it over. It's called selective perfectionism. And what that means is some things do need to be 100%. Like when I'm flying in a plane, I would like the pilot on the plane to get it right 100% of the time. I want it on the runway every time, not 98%. This really matters. Some things, 80% is going to be okay. Anybody upset with a spelling mistake? It is meant to be there. Let's say the plane is 10 minutes late or you don't get the right food or whatever. It's not perfect, but it's okay. Some things, 50% is going to be okay. Just has to be close enough. And so the idea here is you can modify your standards depending on the circumstances, depending on the situation. And the benefit is it just saves you a lot of time, but also you don't get so stressed along the time. Now, if you're an extreme perfectionist, here's the ultimate solution, and that is set a deadline. And so then let's say with a piece of writing, it's not when I'm happy or when I'm ready with it, it's going at 5 o'clock today. So you put a number on it and say it has to happen at that time. Because if you think I'll wait till I'm happy, you just keep going round and round in circles. And so just set a time. And I've got a lot tougher with people over time because I've worked out all of you can meet deadlines. When there really is a deadline, you can get it done. The problem in research is the deadlines are too floppy. Well, if you don't do it today, do it on Monday, do it next week, or put the article in whenever you like, and so you never get around to doing it. So you need to set yourself a deadline and say that's when it's going to happen. So that's the idea, I suppose, of the perfectionistic mindset or way of thinking. And there's another model in psychology that's quite useful for you here. And this is from a woman called Carol Dweck, Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford University. And she has a really helpful model, I think, in terms from an education point of view. You should be aware of this, but it's also helpful for your own well-being. It's about mindsets, and she proposed two different types of mindsets. One is what's called a fixed mindset, and a fixed mindset says intelligence, ability, and potential are fixed. You come out of the womb with a certain amount of abilities. That's just the way it is. You're clever, you're smart, you can run fast, you can do maths, you can sing, you can do it or you can't do it. And that's just it. Too bad. You just have to live with it. It's fixed. A growth mindset says you certainly are born with abilities, but you can learn and grow. You can become smarter. You can go to university and learn things. You can run around the football field and get faster. If you practice singing, you can probably get better at it. If you practice maths, you could get better at those as well. And so Now, the reality is there's probably people are on a continuum somewhere between these extremes. Now, perfectionists tend to be a little bit up the fixed end, which is there's one right way to do this. And this is the way you're supposed to do things. And if you don't do that, it's wrong. And it's very, very bad. And Natalie said this is the approach in schools. That's what they teach now. But it's a perfectionism. And I suppose the problem with that is in that model, mistakes are bad. They expose your limitations because it's not just a mistake. It's now the end of the world. When you get rejected by a journal, it's not just a rejection. It means I'm giving up research. I can't do this. I'm a failure. Whereas with a growth mindset, you go, well, yeah, mistakes happen. People get rejected. It's not very nice, but I'll have another go. Maybe I'll learn from that the next time around. And so certainly in terms of well-being, a growth mindset is going to be more helpful. As Natalie pointed out, that's encouraging children to have it. But as a researcher, it would be really good to have a growth mindset because things are going to go wrong all the time. You're going to get rejected. People are going to criticize your work. Your experiments won't work. And if that proves you're limited or can't do it, you're going to be struggling. So it'd be more helpful to have a growth mindset. And where you can see this very commonly is when you make a mistake. Because what you have to do is when things go wrong, accept that mistakes happen. It's a chance to learn and improve. So when someone criticizes your work, how do you respond? Do you go, oh, this is the end of the world? Or do you go, yeah, it's not very nice, but maybe I can fix it up the next time. When you get rejected from a journal, feel a bit sad, but then, yeah, but hang on, we can do something about that. We can move on from there. And where do you get your growth mindset? Well, as with everything in psychology, blame your parents or your early carers, the people around you, the way they sort of responded to you and the way you do it. But the good news is you can change your mindset as well. And that's how you're looking at thinking. And as I said, it's a bit linked to perfectionism and a more critical or a harsh view of yourself. And I like this quotation that said, I didn't think I was a bully until I heard how I talked to myself. I think I owe myself an apology. And many of us say things to ourselves we would never think of saying to a good friend. We're really harsh on ourselves. And again, that's that pushing yourself really hard. And I'm going to show you some, and we'll see how do you do this. And so I would encourage you to be a friend to yourself. You'll say to yourself, I'm lazy, I'm selfish, I can't do this, I'm a fraud, I should be working harder. Look at that big mistake, I'm a failure. And so you say that to yourself. What would you say to a friend? Well, you'd probably say, look, you're doing okay. You worked hard all day, so maybe it's okay to have the evening off. That's what you'd say to someone you liked, but to yourself, it's I'm lazy, I can't do this. I'm being selfish. When somebody asks you to do something and you don't do it, oh, I'm selfish. What would you say to a friend? Well, you'd say, hang on, it's important to look after yourself as well as doing things for other people. I've helped out lots of things. It's just this one thing I can't do. I can't do this. What would you say to a friend? You'd probably say, well, maybe you could do it. You've done other difficult things. It might be hard, but you could give it a go. I'm a fraud or an imposter, when somebody points out some gaps. What would you say to a friend? Well, you'd probably say, look, hang on, you've worked hard for your achievements. You haven't lied or cheated. You've actually earned what you've done. I should be working harder, achieving more, which is the sort of motto of most researchers and academics all the time. I should be doing more. What would you say to a friend? Well, sure, there's more to be done, but look at all the stuff you have done. You've actually done pretty well. You focus on the things you've done. And the last one, oh, look at that big mistake. I'm a failure. I'm going to be found out. What would you say to someone you liked? Things go wrong for everybody. It's not nice, but you get over it and you move on and fix things up. So what I'm going to give you now is just a moment to think about how do you speak to yourself? Do you recognize some of these things, or would you talk to yourself the way you talk to your friends or whatever? So I'm going to put you in the breakout groups to have a little discussion about this. When you're in the breakout groups, you can say hello to the colleagues, put on your audio video and have a little chat. I'll give you about 5 minutes to do this. Have a little chat. Do you recognize this language, or are you a bit more kinder to yourself or other people as well? So I'm going to set up these breakout groups. All right, so hopefully you had a bit of a chat with some of your colleagues out there in the rooms. And so an interesting exercise for you the rest of today really is just watch how you talk to yourself. Just notice that internal chatter and think, would I say that to somebody I liked? Would I say that to a friend, or are you really harsh on yourself? Like I always think it's bad enough if other people pick on you, but when you pick on yourself, that's really unfair. But the good news is you can do something about it, and then sort of be a bit kinder to yourself. This doesn't make you soft or indulgent. This will be good. You'll feel better and get more done as well. So for the rest of the day, just watch how you talk to yourself. Now, a couple more ideas, and then we're going to have our break. And I'm just going to talk about being overwhelmed. And to be honest, I think the whole world is a bit overwhelmed at the moment, but most people, researchers, constantly feel overwhelmed. There's so much to do and feeling overwhelmed by things. But there's a bit of psychology that's really quite useful here. And this book was written a few years ago by an American psychologist, Barry Schwartz, called The Paradox of Choice. And the summary behind that book is, in the modern world, we are flooded with choice. You go down to the supermarket, so many different types of juice or cheese or milk. And that's supposed to be good. But two things happen to you when you get lots of choice. The first one is you get paralyzed. You look at the first, that's interesting, and the next one. And the more you look at all these things, the more paralyzed you become. But the real paradox is, once you pick one of those, your brain is always going, maybe it should have been the other one. And the paradox is, the more choice you have, the less happy you become. But that's what happens to researchers every day. Because when you sit down at your desk after this workshop, well, what should I work on now? Will I make the changes that revise and resubmit? Or will I get ready for that meeting later on tomorrow? Or will I go and do some reading? Or will I go and check out the COVID updates, whatever it might be? I don't know. I'm paralyzed. I know. I'll check my emails while I'm waiting. And off you go and you do something completely irrelevant because you can't decide. Or you've probably even had the experience where you start working on one thing and your brain goes, no, I should be doing the other one. And no matter what you're doing, you're always thinking, should be doing something else. And so that's that paradox of choice. Now, the solution to the paradox of choice is very easy when you think about it. And that is remove the choice. If you sat down at your desk, or if you went down to the supermarket and there was only one bottle of milk in the fridge, you'd take it and be really happy to get it. If you sat down at your desk this afternoon, and there was a deadline at 5 o'clock today, suddenly you get focused. You forget everything else and say, that's the one I have to do. And that's one of the abilities or skills you have to learn, that ability to focus and narrow down and say, forget about everything else, I'm working on this one right now. And to help you with that, I have a little phrase I use called TNT. And that stands for the next thing. The next thing. And that's that ability to narrow down and say, forget everything else, this is the one I'm working on right now. Now, I used to say to PhD students, so can you tell me what your next thing is? And they go, oh yeah, I know, finish my thesis. And of course that doesn't help at all, that's just overwhelming. So the next thing has to be small. But then over the years, I've learned clever people don't understand the meaning of the word small. Because you go, okay, it wasn't finished the thesis, I'll finish the literature review. Still way too big. So now I talk about microsteps. And a microstep means add in one line. Make one of those changes in the revise and resubmit. Put one number into the table. Now, I know what happens in your head when you hear that. Your brain goes, well, that's not enough. I have to do more. But the minute you say more, you get overwhelmed again. So the microstep is a little trick you play on yourself to get yourself started. And I ran this with some physicists a while ago, and they introduced the concept of nanosteps. Steps that are so small you can barely see them. And I'll give you a few examples and then we'll see what yours are. I ran this at Queen's University in Belfast a while ago. And there was a woman there, she was supposed to be writing. And her nanostep was, find the latest draft of the document I was working on. Because I've got 4 versions, I don't even know which one it is. And it sounds silly, but until you do that, you can't do all the other bits. And so, put in one label, open up the document and put in one thing. So I want you to type into the chat, when you sit down after lunch, what is the nano step? It's not finish everything, it's make one little change or do one little part. So what's your nano step? Yeah, close the door so I'm not available. That would be a very good one, yeah. Make a cup of tea, yes, that's probably a good start. And after that, you might get on to do something else, what the other nano step is. Read the most recent draft of a scientific summary, yes. So just all the abstract or whatever, yeah. Louise, open all the files and you start modeling. Yes, you don't have to do the modeling, just open it up and get started. Merge 2 data sets together, yeah. Write one sentence to address a review comment. And so now you've got the idea, you break it down, and all those things sound doable. You think, I could actually do that. So that's the way you get over the overwhelm, you break it down. Sophie says, write one sentence. Jenny, adjust the first comment in your article. That's it. Rolf, going through a fat folder and find a protocol you're looking for. Absolutely. So if we open up the software you need to be working in, read an email carefully, go through that one and check what's in there. Turn the laptop on. Find the contact details of the greenhouse supplier that I need some data from. Write 3 lines in a methodology. Yeah. Well, once you sound it like that, it all sounds doable now, doesn't it? It doesn't sound so big anymore. And that's what high achievers do. They make it hard. Oh, I have to finish everything. And that just makes you overwhelmed. So the next time you're feeling overwhelmed, focus on TNT, the next thing. I just have to do that little step. Once you do that, you don't feel so overwhelmed anymore. And this helps you with small tasks like that, but it also helps, I think, in what's happening with the world at the moment, because the whole world is a bit overwhelmed. And I'll show you how TNT helps there. I don't know whether any of you watched the Tour de France. I was watching it last week. It's on television late at night here in Australia. And I watch it not for the cycling. I don't care for the cycling at all, but I like the nice tourism and the nice pictures. But these cyclists cycle up these huge mountains in the Alps and the Pyrenees. And I was listening to the commentators one day, and I said, you'll notice they never look at the top of the mountain. Because if you look at the top of the mountain, you get off your bike and go home. Like, it's too hard. What they do is they focus on the next kilometer or the next corner. I just need to get there. Once there's that part of the next part. If you're doing a fun run or a run or whatever, you don't think about 26 miles in a marathon. You think, I got to get the 2-mile mark, the 3-mile mark. You break it down into small little pieces. And so I think that's what has to happen in the world at the moment. You know, we're all wondering what's going to happen later this year and so forth. You've no idea. You get overwhelmed. What you have to think is, what am I going to get done today or this week? And once you do that, you feel a bit better. And so when it all feels overwhelming, the solution is narrow down to the next thing. And I like this quotation from a building at the University of Ghent. It said, the next big thing will be a lot of small things. Because that's how things get done. Lots of small little things, one after the other. And then you move on from there. All right. So one more little idea and then we'll break. And you can have all the plans you like. But unfortunately, things are going to go wrong in research. Things go wrong all the time. And when people start research, they think it's like this. Here I am at A. That's my endpoint over there, B. I'm going to follow the plan and I'm going to get to the end. That's not research. That might be like following a recipe in a cookery book, maybe, or maybe following the IKEA instructions, but I'm not even sure about that. But it's definitely not research. Here's research. You start at A. That's where you think you're going. You draw out your plan, and you start doing the work, and you realize, I'm going in completely the wrong direction. So you revise, and you do something different, but it's still completely wrong. So you try something else, and you think, oh, now I'm getting a bit closer. But what happens to research halfway through everyone's project is B is going to become C. Because as you start doing it, you realize we were looking at the wrong thing. We should have been over there. And C would probably become D. And I describe research more like successive approximations. It's always wrong, but getting a little bit closer every time. Now, when people have gone down this dead end and they said to me, oh, I've just wasted a month. I've just gone down this dead end. I would say, no, you didn't waste a month. You had to do that to work out it didn't work. Because if you knew the answer before you started, it wouldn't be called research. You have to try it to realize it didn't work. If there was a big sign at the beginning saying dead end, you wouldn't have gone down there. You have to do it to realize it was a dead end. And so it's not a waste. And that's research. You're always going to be making mistakes, getting things wrong. And of course, for many people over the last year, the huge big setback has been the pandemic. You're supposed to be traveling to do things, can't do them, you can't get data, can't do lots of stuff. It's very frustrating, but it doesn't mean you can't do it. It means we have to find another way around this or manage that process along the whole way. So it's important that, I suppose, that ability to deal with setbacks. And if you're going to work in research, you have to learn how to deal with setbacks. And I like this quotation from the Irish author Samuel Beckett. He said, ever tried, ever failed? No matter. Try again, fail better. And I like the quotation because I think that summarizes research, which is failing better every time, getting a bit closer. It's wrong, but yeah, we're getting a bit closer to where we were all along that way. And so I suppose when things go wrong, you have to realize, no, this is not the end of the world. We have to modify and move and change. And again, I also think it's a really nice description of resilience, which is things go wrong, yep, but pick yourself up, have another go. So I'm going to help you remember that now. We're going to have a break, but I'm going to put a little earworm into your brain. I don't know whether any of you remember the band Chumbawamba. And they were famous in the 90s, and they had #1 hit, I Get Knocked Down, But I Get Up Again. So I'm going to put this in your head. All right, so let's pick it up from there. So before the break, we were talking about things going wrong, setbacks. Well, occasionally in research, things might go right. And then it's important to celebrate And researchers are very, very bad at celebrating. And so it's important to reward yourself when things go well. You know, when a paper works or when things go well, to reward yourself in some way. And researchers are not very good at that. And so, you know, when you submit a paper, when you get feedback, when a presentation goes well, you need to reward yourself in some way. So at the earlier, I told you that you could have lots of coffee breaks and lots of whatever. Now, as well as coffee, I would encourage you to have cake or lunch or time off as well, so you can reward yourself. This doesn't make you soft or indulgent; it makes you feel good. You know when you get that email saying your paper's been accepted, they usually feel good for about 30 seconds. And, oh, now I got to make changes, I got to do the revisions or something like that. And so you don't get much satisfaction when things go well. So it's really important to reward yourself when things go well, to have it bring in cake or have coffee, morning tea with your friends or something like that to reward yourself. It makes you feel better. It'll make you want to do it again. So I would encourage you to celebrate when things go well. Now, the next one I want to talk about is distractions. And again, once again, the whole world is a bit distracted at the moment. But what in particular I want to talk about is technology. Because we've been sold a lie by the technology companies. And the lie is you're more effective if you're doing 6 things at the same time. You can multitask. You can be doing all these things at the same time. Because I'll bet as I'm talking to you now, many of you are multitasking. Some of you are probably checking emails. You're probably checking websites, doing other things. You're going, look at me, I'm multitasking. And all the research in psychology is we do not multitask. What we do is we single task quickly. And then we switch. We do one thing and we switch and we switch and we switch. Now the switch happens very quickly, so it looks like it's all happening at the same time, but no, it's happening one by one by one. And every time you switch, a little bit of work has to happen in your brain, which lowers your performance a little bit. Now, when you're doing simple jobs like listening to me and checking your emails, you don't notice any problem, because they are really easy jobs. But it's when you start doing complicated jobs, that's when the problem happens. Let's say you're reading an article. It's all going well, you're in the zone, and then your phone or your email goes bing, and you pick it up and it'll say something ridiculous like, the IT system will be unavailable between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m. on Saturday morning or something ridiculous. And you go, oh, where was I? I've lost my train of thought. And there's research to show that every time you get interrupted, it can take you up to 5 minutes to get back to where you were before the interruption. Because you got to reset. Where was I thinking? What was I going? So it's not the 2 seconds that's the problem. The problem is it breaks your concentration. In fact, I read a paper recently that said it's worse than that. It said once you get interrupted, you go, well, now that I'm interrupted, I might as well put the kettle on and make a cup of tea or make a phone call, and it's going to take you 20 minutes to get back to where you were before that interruption. And that's why for many people working from home has been a disaster, because there's so many distractions around you all the time. The dog needs to go for a walk, the cat's walking across your keyboard, someone's delivering things to the front of the house, all this stuff going on around you all the time. For some people it's great, but for an awful lot of people, when there's lots of distractions, it hasn't worked so well at all. So, but equally, when you're at work, working in open plan offices or shared spaces just don't work very well at all. So what can we do about it? Well, this is where I have a really important concept for you, the difference between what I call real time versus fantasy time. And real time means head down doing one thing at a time. No email, no internet, no distractions, just focused. Fantasy time is 2 minutes of that, then a phone call, then somebody asks you a question and something else goes wrong. And my experience now with thousands of people like you says 2 real hours, 2 hours with nothing else happening, equals about 10 fantasy hours. And I meet people and they say, I got into work early one morning, and I could get more done between 7 and 9 than the rest of the day. Well, how did that work? Between 7 and 9, you could actually focus. The rest of the day, it's all the distractions around you all the time. That's why many of you probably get up early. Some of you work late. Some of you work on the weekends because you work out when there's no one around. I can get a lot of work done. So that's sort of good news and bad news. The bad news for you is a lot of the time you're putting in is probably fantasy time. It's not really very effective at all. The good news is this afternoon or tomorrow, you don't need 10 hours, you need 2, but they got to be real. So how do you make them real? Well, the first thing is, if you still have a door in your life, close the door. Not all day, but for 1 hour or 2 hours while you're trying to work. Tell your family when the door is closed, I'm not available. This doesn't work so good little kids, but with colleagues or friends or whatever, when the door is closed, I'm not available. You need to get yourself a do not disturb sign. We have these, it says, shh, search in progress. So during the 1 or 2 hours, that goes on the door or whatever. If you're in a shared space, this has to go on your forehead or on your ear, something like that. But what you also have to do is get yourself some earphones. Not the little white ones. You need industrial strength earphones, really big ones. Because it's not so much to keep the noise out, it is to keep the people out. It is to leave me alone. So you put all those big things on. However, the real problem for everybody is you can close the door, you can put the sign on the door, but most of the interruptions are not on the outside, they're on the inside, and that's you. And that's when you have to talk about technology. So during these 1 or 2 hours, what you have to do is turn off all alerts, alarms, notifications, flashing lights, vibrations, all those things they've done to try and get your attention. And this is very easy for me to say, but for most people nowadays, this is harder than giving up addictive drugs, because we are psychologically addicted to our devices. And what does that mean? That means you no longer think about answering it, it happens automatically. If I gave you a break now, what's the first thing everyone would do? Well, just see if anything come in. You don't have to do it, but you do it automatically. So I'm going to give you a moment to talk about this now. I'm going to put you back in the breakout groups, and I want you to tell people, how addicted are you, or have you got strategies for this, and could you get 1 or 2 real hours? So I'm going to mix the groups up so you meet different people. How addicted you are, or whether it's possible to get 1 or 2 real hours. And what you have to know is, as I said, the technology company have hired evil psychologists to make you addicted. They worked out all the techniques to make it essential for you, because I bet most of you don't have an alarm clock now. How do you wake up in the morning? It's on your phone, which means first thing in the morning, before you do anything else, you're out of bed, you already turn on the phone. And when you pick it up, oh, there's a notification there. I better just check that. And once you check that, a video starts playing, which you didn't want to watch. At the end of the video, it'll say, here's some more you might want. When Netflix comes to the end of an episode, it doesn't stop. It says in 8 seconds, there'll be another one. That used to be called a stopping cue. It was a signal to stop. Well, they've taken all those away. When you get to Facebook, there's no end to the Facebook or the Twitter feed. It goes on forever. You never get to the end of Facebook. It goes on and on forever. Last thing at night, what do you do? It's on your phone again. So it's just made essential to all the parts of what you want to do. So you got to fight back, because they've worked out all these techniques. One person said to me, I put my phone face down on the desk so it doesn't bother me. And I read research about that. It said if your phone is anywhere within eyesight, it doesn't matter whether it's up or down, you're going to get distracted by it, because once you see it, you're going to go, I better check that. So you need to put it on silent and do not disturb, but ideally put it in a drawer or in another room. Because if it's nearby, you're going to pick it up and do it and get distracted by it. And so you need to get rid of it. There are now apps you can download that block your internet access, and they're quite useful as well, because you need all the help you can to sort of fight back against it. So the good news, though, is 2 real hours, 2 hours without your phone or without distractions, you get a lot of work done. But then people go, well, hang on, if I could get 2 real hours, maybe I could get 4 real hours. Or what about 6 real hours? Why can't I do more? And that's just a wrong understanding of work, because there's a little model called diminishing returns. I'll show you how it works. So let's say you're at this workshop and you think, look, because I've spent 2 hours here, I'm going to have to work late tonight now to catch up on that. So you work late this evening, but because of that, you get less sleep. And because you get less sleep, you're going to be tired tomorrow or get run down. And because you're tired, you're less productive tomorrow. So now you got to work later tomorrow to make up for the stuff you didn't do. And then you work all weekend to make up for the stuff you did in the week, which means you're tired next week. And this is how you can end up working longer and longer hours and getting less and less done. And when people come to me and said, oh, I was working for 14 hours yesterday, I'm not very impressed. I'm thinking that's because you are really inefficient. If you were organized, you could have got it done in half the time. You were there staring at the screen, but nothing was going in. And with academic work in particular, you just can't use your neurons that hard. They get tired, and you're there, but not physically, not thinking so straight. So you need to break this pattern. And so what you need to do is set limits for yourself. After 2 hours, stop, go and do something else. So you need limits. Definitely, and this is the problem with working from home, you need a finishing time, because you just move from the kitchen to another room and you're at work all the time. And so you need time. It's 5 o'clock, it's time to stop. You definitely need breaks, like get up and have morning tea and other times, but also you need a lunch break. When we finish this workshop, do you start checking your emails? Or I would suggest get up, have lunch, go outside and walk in the sunshine while it's still sunny and enjoy that. It'll be better for you. And it'll mean you'll be more productive in the afternoon. If you take that break, you'll do better in the afternoon. And again, you need weekends. The problem when you're working from home is Saturday just looks like Friday. Sunday likes Monday. You're in the same place all the time. So you need a weekend. So when it comes to Friday, you need to mark it and say, the week's over. I'm doing something different now, and sort of switch off in some way. And so again, this is up to you. And it's hard when you're working from home, but you have to sort of build in routines and boundaries for yourself. Now, one of the problems for you, though, is, is that ability to switch off, because you can do your work in your head. You don't have to be at work. You can carry it around with you, thinking about your research, about your work, and so forth. And it's nice that you care about your work, but if you care about it too much, you sort of wear out. So you need that ability to switch on and switch off. And I'm going to give you a few suggestions, and we'll see how do you do it. But one good way of learning to switch off, very relevant for researchers, is exercise. Because most of your job is very sedentary. You are sitting down in front of a computer all day long. And if you're working from home, you're probably sitting at a bad ergonomic chair and table trying to do work as well, so bad conditions. So you need exercise. So that's good for you physically. You need to get out and run or walk or swim. But it's also good for you mentally. Because when you're out there sweating and puffing, it's pretty hard to be thinking about that research problem that's back there. You're in the moment doing the thing you're doing. So good exercise, get outside. And again, while the sun is shining, you get out and do it. It's good for you physically, but also for you mentally. It helps you switch off. There's lots of research to show that nature is really quite restorative. If you get out with trees and birds and squirrels and whatever, it makes you feel better. So once again, at lunchtime today, it'd be good, get up, have a little walk around the block, around the park or something like that. It makes you feel better. When you come back, you'll be thinking more clearly as well. But other things to help you switch off are running, exercise, creative writing, sleeping, having a little nap, playing with pets. Young kids are wonderful because they're going to grab your attention. Voluntary work, meditation, walking, anything, whatever it is you like to do that. And that becomes a switching off from the work sort of thing. Again, during lockdown, everybody was cooking and gardening and those sort of things. And they're good because they're very different from the day job. So let's find out, how do you do it? I'll get you to type into the chat, what is your strategy for switching off? Or do you not have a strategy, or is it with you all the time? So how do you get work out of your head and say, it's time to stop now? All right, so we've got a few gardening, yeah, fantastic. Walking the dog, yeah, because they want to get out all the time. Yeah, walking up in mountains and out in nature, going for a walk and a run, and certainly good physical things like that, because while you're doing that, your brain isn't thinking about other things. Yeah, cooking for a lot of people is important because you got to eat anyway, and cooking is so different from sitting down, trying to write other things. Gardening, candy books, yeah, reading mind candy books. Swimming, looking after the guinea pig, time with friends, out for a walk, going to the garden. Climbing and surfing, no space to think of anything else. Absolutely, when you're doing that, there's no, you're in the moment, you're there. Walking the dog, mountains and beach, exercise, time out, family time, going for a short walk during the day, yep, meditation, a long bike ride. And the idea, whatever it is that stops you just going on about work. And so, if you're walking, you still think about it, you need to run or do something that sort of gets you in the moment, so you're not sort of, your brain isn't recycling. Yeah, Matt says a 10-year-old daughter. Yes, young kids are fantastic because they will not put up with you being distracted. I want your attention now. And that's frustrating, but it's really very good because it forces you to be there with them. Switching off the PC and getting out of the room, yes. And again, one person, I remember running this in Dublin for a person in Ireland during their lockdown, and this person was working in the same room they were living in, really. And so what they would do at the end of the day was close down the laptop, but not only that, put a sheet over the whole table so you couldn't see all the stuff on it, because if you see it, you're going to think about it. And then the next morning, take off the sheet and open it up again. And it was that sort of ritual. So it was the switching off. For some people, they have other rituals. One person recently, her ritual was, if I'm wearing shoes, I'm at work. If I'm wearing my slippers or my Ugg boots, that's casual. And so again, something like that to say, work, not work. That's why dressing for work can be quite good as well, because this is work. This is the other part of my life as well. You need to separate out and have some boundaries. Yeah, Wendy says work a 9 to 5, around 6, weekends, no work, full stop. Yeah, and again, rules and boundaries like that are really helpful. And I would strongly argue you'll be more effective on Monday if you have the weekend off. People think I'm getting ahead by working, but no, you're wearing yourself out. All right, so Yes, and Cami has a good question, but how do you switch off the thoughts at 2 a.m.? Well, we're going to come to that. And so this is a bit about stress, I suppose, and because you can be physically switched off, but the problem for you is your brain is still going, going, going. So we're going to talk about that now, and we're talking about stress. And we're going to talk about with stress, it sort of builds up on people. You don't really know what's happening, and so suddenly you're really stressed. And I meet people who are almost burnt out, and how did that happen? Because it sort of creeps up. So with stress, one of the things you have to learn are your early warning signs. And I'll give you a few and we'll see what yours are, but you'll all be familiar with road rage. One of my early warning signs is furniture rage. And that means getting angry with the furniture. You know, you walk to the house and you bump into the table, bloody table. What's wrong with the table? Nothing wrong with the table. It's like where it always was. I'm not paying attention. Another one would be for me dropping things, getting clumsy. Or if I'm working on the keyboard and I'm stressed, I make lots of spelling mistakes. What's wrong with the keyboard today? Nothing wrong with the keyboard. It's me. I'm not paying attention. Some of you may have physical signs. People get headaches, clenched jaws, furrowed brow, pains across there. Some people have increased appetite, reduced appetite, can't get to sleep. Very common ones are shortness of temper and getting irritated or impatient with people, just getting cross with the kids when they haven't done anything, or getting cross with your colleagues. Now, if you don't know what your early warning signs are, here's a fun exercise for the evening. Ask your partner or your family or friends, and they will delight in taking out a big long sheet of paper and writing out all the early warning signs. And you can do the same for them, and then you won't talk to each other for the rest of the evening. So let's see, anybody want to fess up to their early warning signs? Have you got little signs that you're starting to get stressed or starting to lose it a bit? Let's see, anybody recognize their early warning signs? Yeah, shortness of temper is usually a pretty quick one. Yeah, just getting irritable. Yeah, sometimes get chest pains. Yeah, indigestion, getting snappy, mood swings, running around and stumbling on words. Yeah, can't laugh at things. Yes, or a lot sense of humor failure. Nothing's funny anymore. You know, people say something and you get irritated by it. Getting annoyed with your partner. Yes, your poor partner hasn't done anything wrong, and there you are snapping at them like, "What did I do?" And then suddenly there's a big fight, big odds. They're thinking that's not fair. Getting irritable with the kids. Hunger, yeah, some people increased appetite. Yeah, I get bitter when I see people enjoying themselves. Yeah, when you look at other people and think, hang on, that's not fair, you know, getting more cynical about things. Yeah, shortness of temper, aversion to mess. Yeah, some people have to tidy up everything. Everything has to be clean and tidy. Yeah, blinking a lot, jaw, neck tension, quickly cross with the kids and husband. Yeah, everything looks messy and so clean. Can't make decisions, yes, in that ability to decide. One person said that whenever she's stressed, all the stupid people seem to come out. You know, why are all these stupid people out today, or getting in my way and all these things? No, they're the same people normally, but you're just not tolerant of them today. And so first of all, it would be good to work out what your early warning signs are. But once you work them out, you have to do something. What people usually do is keep on going. No, so when I start bumping into the furniture, the first thing is take some time out. I don't need a lot of time. It could be go and boil the kettle, sit down and play with the cat, walk around the garden for 5 minutes. Because if I keep going, it'll get worse. So it's like resetting the computer. Just press the reset button, let's get it going again, and sort of calm yourself down a bit. So timeout is a very simple one. Of course, it's the last thing you want to do. You want to go faster, but it's going to get worse. So you have to teach yourself, no, when I start hitting the furniture, time to sit down and have a little break here. This is when it would be really good to have your support crew. That's when you can talk about it with people and ring up your partner and say, do you know what the idiot's done now? Isn't it awful? They just rejected my paper. Isn't this terrible? And just have a bit of a whinge. And the other person doesn't have to fix the problem. All they have to do is have a supportive nod. That must be awful, isn't it? As a psychologist, we learn the supportive nod. That must be difficult, yes. And you're just letting the person vent, because venting helps. It gets it out of your head, out there. And so, you know, how does talking help? Well, you're not longer thinking about it. It's just out there right now. So talking about it helps. If you haven't got somebody to talk about it with, writing it down helps. Let's say if at a difficult afternoon, things are going wrong, before you go home or before you close up, get out a pen and write down, the thing that's bothering me is. And you wonder how that helps. But once again, it gets it out of your head onto a physical thing and go, look at that, it's not so bad, I can manage that. Or even if it is bad, at least it's there. I don't have to keep thinking about it now. So for some people, keeping a diary or a journal quite helpful, but just writing down and then throwing in the bin can actually be helpful, just to get it out of your head. Now I don't have to think about it anymore. Now, before this, we were talking about bad distractions like the phone and whatever, but there are good distractions. These are the things that stop you worrying about stuff. So for example, Music is a wonderful distraction because music creates mood. I'm sure you have songs, once you hear them, you start to smile, others make you tap your feet, other ones make you feel tired or sad or relaxed. So it would be a really good time to have a good playlist of songs so that when you worry, you play these songs, it chills you out. And if you play the same ones repetitively, you almost condition yourself. It's now time to wind down. And so music is very powerful. It creates mood. I used to say listen to the radio, but that's not so good these days because it's all bad news all the time. So now is the time for podcasts and audiobooks. My partner is currently listening to Stephen Fry reading the Harry Potter series. And that is fantastic because that is going to, for it to go to sleep, that is going to go on forever. She just listens to a few minutes and falls asleep and then replays it again and so forth. So, but again, you condition yourself, you hear that, you just sort of wind down. So there's lots of podcasts these days on general interest or history or whatever it is that fires you up. Get podcasts good because they stop you worrying about things. And again, someone's talking about, waking up at 2 a.m. in the morning, can't go to sleep. Well, that's when she listens to the podcast, that winds you down again. Movies, playing computer games, TV, anything like that is better than worrying. You might think, oh, I'm wasting time. That's better than wasting time worrying. So whatever it is that stops or breaks that worrying habit. And here's another one, the lost art of reading. And I'm talking about reading books, not on your device, because if you read on your device, you're going to get pop-ups and alerts and all that. No, go to the bookcase, get out a book. If you want to go to sleep tonight, get out a book and read a physical book or something like that. Again, because you get engaged in that, you're not thinking about something else. So then there are others as well, ways of switching off, and meditation is really good. Mindfulness, I'm going to give a plug for Gemma and the mindfulness there and mindfulness is really good because you can do it so easily. It's really popular. You don't need any special equipment. You can do it really quickly and it sort of helps you get in that moment and so forth. So a really good one. And Gemma might mention that later. Yoga, Tai Chi, Pilates, they all work. My view is find one that works for you and build that into your life and make a routine out of it. And so if you want to learn how to wind down or try and go back to sleep in the middle of the night, learn one of these and just learn that habit. And again, it won't work the first time you do it, but if you do it repetitively, it sort of teaches you how to manage those things. Now, hopefully that works, but sometimes the worries go round and round in your head. And this is, when people wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning worrying about things. And that's where we have to talk about the difference between worry and problem solving. Now, problem solving is a very good approach. Here's the problem, look at the options, make a decision. Very good, I hope you've got that strategy. That's not worry. Worry is the same negative thought going round and round in your head. I wonder what's going to happen tomorrow. I wonder will my paper get accepted? Will my thing work? No intention of fixing the problem, just the repetitive thought going round and round on spin cycle in your brain. But what happens is people think, if I worry, people confuse worry and problem solving. They think if I worry about this, it might make a difference. And then they have what's called magical thinking. Worrying might help me find a solution. No, problem solving helps you find a solution. Worry just makes you feel bad. But the problem for all of us is we've spent a lifetime getting good at worrying. We've become high quality worriers. And we think, I've got a bit of spare time. What will I do? I'll just do a bit of worrying. I'll worry about tomorrow, or I'll worry about next week, or I'll worry about no intention of fixing it, just your thought going off into all these spirals of bad things that might happen. So problem solving good, worry not so good. So as I said, we've become habitual worriers, so you have to learn how to break the worrying habit. And so we've shown you that. So things like debrief with somebody, just talk about it, what's going to happen, how will we work out? Write it down if you can. Distract yourself by listening to podcasts or whatever like that. And again, someone just typed in, I sent emails to myself when things go round and around my head in the night, reassures me that I can pick it up in the morning. And that's like writing it down, because now I don't have to think about it anymore. It's over there. So writing down helps. If you don't want to send yourself an email, get a sheet of paper and write it beside you on the bed and say, there it is. I don't have to worry about it now. Sometimes I decide that I'll worry about it later. I'm not going to worry about it now. I'll worry about that this evening. And sometimes as a psychologist, I used to give people worry time. What does that mean? Well, that means, okay, this evening between 6 and 6:30, I want you to worry as hard as you can about things. And then after 6:30, you got to stop. And tomorrow you can do some more worrying. Like it's completely futile, but at least you feel I'm done my quota of worrying for the day now. I don't have to think about it anymore. And so at least it stops you worrying all day long. Now, hopefully some of those things will help. But for some people, or sometimes the worries are very, very persistent and they can be really hard to change. No matter how much you think about it, you try and stop it, the worries keep coming in, the sort of thoughts and whatever. And so that's when it's important to reach out. And sadly, the mental health in the general population in the UK or here in Australia, whatever, about 1 in 5 people in any population is likely to be experiencing anxiety or depression or some other mental health issue. That's 1 in 5. Sadly, in academia and research, it's higher than that. At PhD level, we talk about 1 in 3 people. And that's at a clinical level. There'll be lots of sort of subclinical or below that level. Now, of course, if you're struggling with things with anxiety or depression or other issues, the last thing you want to do is ask for help. You know, nobody cares, or you can't think very clearly, so you're just not looking for help. So, but it's really important when you can't dislodge those worries of yourself is to reach out. Because the good news is there is support, but you have to reach out. The support can't come and get you. You have to make that effort. And that's why it's having friends, you know, contacting your friends. The isolation isn't good, so contact your friends and colleagues. Counselling service, the counselling service at the university will still be there in online or whatever mode. Psychological help or anything like that. So all these supports are there, but unfortunately you do have to reach out. But I reassure you, so if things aren't going so well for you, I would encourage you, reach out. There is support, but you have to ask for it. And that's about looking after yourself. But also, I think we have an obligation to look after other people. Because, when you're on campus, when you see people, you probably do this automatically. When you see your friend and they're having a bad day, you say, how are things going? You don't look so good. You want to have a chat. And that's really helpful. This is harder at the moment when people are at home, you don't see them. So you don't know how they're going. And so I would encourage you, if you have a colleague who you know isn't going so well, maybe it's time to reach out to them and say, how are things? Now, the reason I think we're reluctant to do that is, but what if I ring and they say that things aren't going so well? What do I do then? Well, it's not that hard. Here in Australia, we have a day called Are You OK Day? And it's a day to encourage us to ask other people, are you okay? And it's a shame we only have one day for it. It should be all year round. But I think the reason for that day is to show us how to do it. And it's not hard. So the first thing is ask, are you okay? And the crucial thing is listen. You don't have to fix their problem. And in fact, it's not even very helpful to fix their problem because your fix might not be their fix. You're not in their shoes. So don't, your advice might not have been helpful for you. Just listening supportively is what you need to do. You might encourage action. Maybe you could get some help from a psychologist or from counseling, or do you want to go out and do something? And maybe check in again. How about we catch up again next week? And so I wrote a section on the book about that. So first of all, ask, are you okay? Secondly, listen, and then suggest supports. And down there in the little text in the bold, it says, small signs of caring can make a big difference to someone who's going through a tough time. One of your colleagues, things aren't going so well, you sending them an email or just checking in with them can make a big difference to that person. So I would encourage you, and this is where you can look after other people, is reach out and say, how are things going for you? All right, now we're coming close to the end. I have one more model, and then I'm going to ask you, what are you going to do as a result of this? But I think this model is probably the most important one of all, so I'll save it to the end. And this one is called the circles of influence. And what it says is that for all of us here, there are some things we can control. So you can control what you do. When you finish here in a few minutes' time, do you get out your phone and start checking your updates, or do you go outside into the sunshine and get some sun, or do you go and have lunch, or whatever you do? And you can control how you respond. You can't control what people do to you, but how do you respond? Then there's a bigger circle of things you can influence. So you can influence other people. You could say to other people, look, when the door is closed and the sign is on, can you leave me alone? Now, you can't make it happen, but you can increase the chances a bit. And you can influence your relations with people, your colleagues and whatever. And then there's a much bigger circle, which should be the size of the universe these days, of things you can't control. So you can't control what other people do. You can do the best you can, but people will still interrupt you, or they won't help you out, or they get in the way. University hierarchy. They come with all these silly rules to make your life hard and to make it difficult for you, silly admin things to do. Government policy. You might not disagree with that, but you can't really do very much about it unless every 3 or 4 years. And there's a big one at the moment up here called pandemic. Because you can read every website in the world and watch every news channel and become the world expert on the pandemic, and it isn't going to make any difference to what happens in the world. The problem at the moment is an awful lot of people are spending a lot of time and energy thinking about all the stuff they can't control, what other people are doing, what's the government doing, what's going to happen with the pandemic. And that's why watching the news is so dangerous for people at the moment, because you find out all the bad stuff, but that you can do nothing about. So what I would say is at the moment, you need to spend as little time as possible thinking about things you can't control. The things you can influence, do what you can, and then move on from that circle. And that just leaves the green one in the middle. And if you ever listen to a sports coach or a sports psychologist, they will always use this phrase, which is control the controllables. We're not going to worry so much about the other lot. We're just going to do what we can do. And the good thing for all of you is the more time you spend on that green circle, two things happen. The first one is it gets bigger. If you put your phone in the drawer or turn off the alarms, you won't get interrupted so much. If you close the door and set aside time, you can get things done. If you stop waiting for the motivation fair, you could actually make a start on things and not feel so guilty about it. And so, first of all, you get more done. But the better one is you feel better. So now instead of saying the whole world's a mess, everything's out of control, what's going to go wrong, you go, I can't do anything about that. I'm going to focus on what I can do. It makes you feel better. And as I said at the beginning, in research, there are so many things out of your control. If you keep thinking about them, you sort of feel powerless. But actually, there are things I can do that will make me feel better and make things more likely to happen. So here's the question for you. What can you do, or maybe not do, not check emails or turn off your phone, that could help you stay well in your research career? So I'm going to get you to type into the chat, based on everything we've talked about, what can you do or not do? So get you to type in a few examples. So it could be have a morning tea or a coffee, or go to that seminar, or put your phone away in another room. It could be make a start on that project that's bothering you. Not work on your days off or your annual leave. I strongly encourage that. And to make you feel better, you'll be more effective when you come back as well. You'll actually get more done. When he says, go out for a walk at lunchtime, great. Yeah, especially in this nice weather. Switch off from working in the evenings. Yes, this illusion that you get more done. Yeah. So if you get back into the habit of turning emails off for chunks of time, that'd be great. And turn off your phone as well. Isabel, start the day regularly with a morning coffee with a friend, and then have 2 hours of focus time. That'd be a great way to get the day going. Yeah. And he said, plan in breaks into your day and schedule small tasks. Turn off email notifications. Great. Turn off all alerts and alarms. I would say you do not need this thing telling you every time. So we said, move the phone to a different room when working and schedule time in calendar for different tasks. Have a working plan. Don't passively check phone and email when working. Yeah, but you're kidding yourself if you think you're being effective. So put it away for a small period of time, work hard, and then come back. Put my phone away and set a schedule. And this all sounds easy, but remember, you're all addicted, and so this is going to be hard to do. Leah says, allow myself to work according to what I'm able to do rather than what I think I should be doing or what other people are doing. Yes, so, but this is where routines help. I'll work hard here, then I stop. Jane says, I've just put my phone in the drawer, not going to work after hours and weekends, great. Start going out for a walk to switch off for an hour, great. Start having start and finish times, have 2 hours of phone free, and forget about the motivation fairy. Yes, doesn't exist. Set specific time and time limit for those additional projects. Natalie, try and organize and choose a specific time to work. Not actively discouraging myself from complex tasks. And the way to do it is make it small so that you can start it and get it doing. Plan days and make sure I prioritize my own goals and not just things that other people want from you. Great. Stick to the 2 hours. Have a bit of a laughter. Absolutely. Yeah. Laughter is addictive. So, you can even listen to, you can just downloaded laughter you can listen to, which makes you feel better. Working with others on small bits of research. All right. So I have one final question, and then I'm going to hand back to Gemma to wrap things up. But I'm going to just ask you, what has been the most interesting or useful thing? And it could have been something I said, or maybe chatting with people in the breakout groups, or hearing the chats, or hearing that the motivation fairy doesn't exist, but actually you can make a start on these things, or that it's okay to take breaks and that you'll be more effective. That working massive hours might not be the most effective way. So just find out what was most interesting or useful. Yeah, and Natalie, we're not alone. For a lot of people, that's really important. And I said isolation is not good. So these type of things work for that reason. Perfectionism, yes, the high standards. Emily says active motivation, action. Use Microsteps to do the first thing. Jane says reflecting on the impact and limitations of perfectionism. Yeah, we could spend a lot of time just on that. Gemma, the effectiveness of focus time. Yes, small time, you can get a lot done if you can really focus. 2 real hours. The nano and microsteps. I always worry I haven't done enough work. Yes. Rolf says selective perfectionism. Yeah, and control circles of control. Gemma, send documents with 80% complete. Absolutely. Perfectionism, microsteps against procrastination. The talks about perfectionism mindset for Wendy. Carl says motivation and selective perfectionism. Breaking down your master plan to small bits for Evan. Sophie says focus time and actions to spur motivation and researcher traits. Yes, good. Jenny, the routine is something you should stick to precisely when you feel least like that. That's exactly right. You do it even though you don't want to do it, but that makes you feel better. And that's when you have to get yourself over that start. I just have to do it. It's just time to do this thing now. Am I breaking the work down to micro and nano steps? And Lauren, the micro steps and nano steps. And that's a big thing for researchers. When everything is huge, the way to get past that is focus on one small little thing. You feel better and you can get more done at that point. Okay, now before I hand back, first of all, I'm going to send the slides through to Gemma and Alison, so they'll send them out to you, so you'll have copies of those. Thanks a lot for your contributions in the breakout groups, because people learn a lot from just chatting with each other, but also in the chats, because people, I read them out because people learn from what other people have said as well. So I'm going to leave it there. It's almost 8:30 p.m. here on Tuesday. I think I've done enough work for the day, so I'm just going to hand back to Gemma, and she might wrap things up or finish it off, and maybe do a plug for your mindfulness as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hugh. That was just such a brilliant talk, and I loved the interaction and also just how you seem to see into my own head, actually. And I'm sure it was probably the same for lots of us. It really felt just so relevant to my own processes when I'm writing, and it's very helpful. So thank you. Yeah, and I hope you're seeing all the messages that are coming in from people in the chat saying thank you. So yes, that's obviously shared by lots of us. Thank you. Yeah. So it's not so much of a plug, but just to say that there are some, so I work for the Mindfulness Centre, and there are some audio resources if you want to just pick up a free audio practice. I've just put in the link there for anyone who might find that useful. But yes, and also a huge thank you to Alison who organised this. So thank you, Alison. Yeah, just a message from Alison around, she'll be sending around a feedback form, and it would be so helpful for us. If you found this useful, do say, because it means that we can put on more events like this if we get lots of positive feedback, which I'm sure we would. So yes, that will come around in your email from Alison. So please, I know it's not the most exciting thing, is it, filling in a form, but it genuinely is helpful, and it will take about 5 minutes. So thank you. And yes, I guess just again a huge thank you to Hugh. I do suggest that everyone follows him on Twitter. It's brilliant. It's really helpful. And yeah, I think that's probably about it, unless there